When I was first transitioning out of my fiat job into, say, Unchained, the question I would ask myself is, if Bitcoin is money, what is the product of money? And the product of money is financial services. It's FTX, it's Celsius, it's BlockFi. They're all trying to pretend as if Bitcoin is the same, and it's not. The ones doing it as if they were operating on a fiat standard, they're all going to get wrecked, and they do every single week, every single year. What does this look like if we try to take Bitcoin's native properties, right, and make sure that our customers are benefiting from that? From the perspective of the people that have dollars, think that, a home in Cincinnati is better collateral than Bitcoin. Try selling a home in Cincinnati and then try selling, 3 Bitcoin.
This is Decentralized Radio. I'm Tristan.
And I'm Ryan.
The goal of this podcast is to help educate you on how to live your most optimal life. We will host industry expert guests to shed light on topics that matter.
We are not gurus, rather 2 individuals who have had to pave their own path to health and vitality, independent of the centralized systems that plague modern society.
All right, we are live here at the Bitcoin Commons in Austin with Will Cole. I realize I don't need my headphones on because this is an in-person podcast. It's been a while. Will, how's it going?
Doing good. Welcome to Austin, Tristan.
Thanks. Yeah, this is exciting. I've probably been overdue for a trip to the Commons for a couple of years now. And
First impressions?
It's awesome. Yeah, it's in it looks like a historic district downtown. And I bumped into Andy Schoonover from Crowd Health, Parker. It's cool to be surrounded by, I guess, the minds of the Bitcoin space all the time.
Yeah, that's kind of the whole idea of the Commons, right? Is just get all the fellas together, co-working. We do Bit Devs, awesome Bitcoin Club. We got Marty's podcast studio right down there. It's a good spot.
When did this start? When did this come to be?
So when Unchained was moving offices, we had a place down the street here, real small space, and we were hosting Bit Devs. And during the pandemic, since we were the only people doing anything in person, because back then we thought COVID was fake. Turned out it was not fake, but it wasn't that big of a deal. We were cramming 100 plus people in that tiny little place. And as Unchained started doing better, we were looking for a new space, mainly for Unchained to do business. But in the back of our minds, it was like, if we could find the right spot to where we could still host Bit Devs. And when we found this building, it was way too much space for Unchained just by itself, because this room here at the Commons is massive. But it was perfect. Like, we could fit 180, 200 people in here if we needed to. That's what you need for bull market Bit Devs. And so it was really just about making a case of we have to fund this space because Unchained can't just buy this giant space by themselves. So we got sponsors for the Commons. We have co-working. We have, podcasting. We kind of turned it into a mini utopia for Bitcoiners, and Unchained is one of the main sponsors, but one of many. Yeah.
That's cool. And I guess, that gets into kind of your backstory as well with Unchained and now at Zaprite. But maybe for that, how long have you been in Austin? And how have you been here? Did you move here because of Bitcoin?
I did not move here because of Bitcoin. I was born here. So I grew up here. I left for about 11 years for college in Dallas. And then I started my career up in New York City. And then when my wife and I decided that we knew we wanted to get married and have a family, we left New York City and we moved to Austin. As just the main thing that drew me here was having grown up here, knowing it was a good place to raise a family. However, the Bitcoin stuff had already started up. This is 2012, 13. I'd come visit, and there were little Bitcoin things happening at the University of Texas. There was this weird group of libertarians, Michael Goldstein and Pierre Rochard, and liked these guys a lot. And so when I moved here, while it wasn't for Bitcoin, it was one of the first things we did was to kind of reform the Bitcoin meetups. We broke off from the shitcoiners and started our own thing. We did our bring your own steak dinners at my house, and then Justin Moon started BitDevs. I think that would have been 2018 or 19, 2018, I think. And but that was when Austin started to take its shape as like, the heart of Bitcoin country here in Texas.
And you were already into Bitcoin before you moved here, right? So you discovered it, I guess, when you were in New York City. Were you working in traditional finance? Because you're product development.
Yeah, I did like software development stuff. I was actually doing a startup, and when I learned about it, but that startup was failing. And then I joined StackOverflow. And it was during those first few months I was at StackOverflow that I was like really starting to get Bitcoin. But yeah, I was in New York City. That's where StackOverflow was based. My brother had an apartment that overlooked the Fed. And during QE in 2010 or so, we'd see these big trucks pull up to the Fed. And I'm sure it's just standard operating procedure, but they were shredding trucks, and there's 6 of them lined up there, and they're just dumping documents in there. And we were just wondering, like, what the hell is going on? What the fuck are these people doing? And it got us into gold. I was a gold bug for about 6 months at the end of 2010. Met a bunch of people working on the Ron Paul campaign. They started talking about Bitcoin around April 2011 when it got on my radar. And having been an established gold bug for about 5-6 months, I really understood money, at least I thought. And it just started from there.
That's incredible. What were those early days like here in Austin, like just talking about Bitcoin with people? Because we're talking 10 plus years ago now at this point, and it's really incredible. And kind of just talk pre-show about that journey. Like, it must be incredible to see the progress. And now, like you said, BitDevs, 100 plus people, you have this own space. I mean, it's exploding really, and Austin's definitely the hub of that.
Yeah, Austin's the sort of foundation for Austin and Bitcoin in my mind is really those crazy libertarians at the University of Texas. It's Michael Goldstein, Pierre Rochard, the Nakamoto Institute, right? They were here. They were writing really crazy Austrian stuff that was blowing my mind. And they were a part of those early meetups. But Austin was also the hotbed of shitcoining as well. Like, as soon as there were Bitcoin meetups, there were shitcoiners. Factum was started here. All the people associated with that, and so it was an interesting group of people. But again, Austin also had a bunch of core developers that just happened to live here. Found out later, Andrew Polstra was here, and Brian Bishop, and people like that, Jimmy Song, and we all found each other pretty quickly, right? By 2014, we had sort of started that Bitcoin maximalist group here in Austin, and really Justin not splitting off, but like starting BitDevs in addition to what we were already doing was a big moment. Getting that hosted at Unchained and then staying open during the pandemic, right? Like, all that stuff was like building up, and then we were the only game in town when COVID started, because Parker and I had been to BitBlock Boom in 2020, and Gary kept his conference open, and we just said to ourselves, I was just getting back from Wyoming for the summer, and I was like, we got to do BitDevs. Called up Justin, he was in, and by December 2020, January 2021, people were flying in from all over. It was the only place to do anything in person to do with Bitcoin. And I give a lot of credit to Gary for inspiring us, to Parker and Justin Moon for getting it in Unchained, for letting us, host it. That's when you started seeing the memes of Austin being, the Bitcoin capital of the world, because it was the only place to go.
Yeah, and I think it is. I mean, there's so many folks here. It's a hub for a lot of things, right? Like, that's why I'm here as well. I'll talk to folks in the health space and ancestral living. I mean, for beef and regenerative ag.
Meat Mafia boys are here.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many more, right? So it's really cool. It's a cool place. It's the community aspect, I think, is big, but I'm curious, as someone who's, spent time in Wyoming, and we can talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
How do you envision like the unfolding? Because I think with city living, there's a lot of challenges, and obviously you have this large, left wing controlling influence probably from people moving here, and you always have that in big cities. But it's still Texas. It's still like a lot of good things going on here. So I guess how do you see it like long term, kind of from a community perspective, playing out?
Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of work from the people that put on these things. Justin Moon, Parker Lewis, these guys that put an incredible amount of effort into getting us all together in person. It's hard to have a really strong and big community if you're not in the city, right? By definition, if you're out in the sticks, there's not going to be a lot of people, right? So one is, we are in Texas. Texas is not just a hotbed for Bitcoin mining, stuff like that. It's a hotbed for freedom. And while Austin, yes, is a liberal city, it's still Texas. Excuse me. And so, take that for what it is that, there's a lot of land out west. If people don't like living in Austin, the hill country is fantastic. And I think that you can get the best of both worlds here.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me. I think it attracts especially younger people that are trying to build a network. And kind of have that community. I think it's really important. Do you envision yourself, like, I guess we were talking a lot earlier about, you wanting to spend more time in Wyoming? Like, what do you think the future looks like for you, your family, kind of still straddling both places, or eventually?
Yeah, we like living in both worlds, right? Like, there's a lot of benefits for being in Texas, being in Austin. Austin's not just, when I say it's a unique place in a lot of ways, right? Before Bitcoin or anything like that, this was the hotbed for homeschooling. It's got great private schools. So it's the things that are tangentially related to Bitcoin, Austin has always been strong in.
Yeah, it's something I think about a lot, just being in Wyoming and trying to like build a community. It's definitely a challenge. I mean, like we were talking about earlier, kind of gathering people, but the freedom of the state level is really important. And people say that probably Wyoming, Texas, or you could say like top Bitcoin states, right?
Sure.
And something I'm curious to hear your opinion about there. Obviously, close to Cynthia and just this whole like, higher level policy and things like that, working at big companies in Bitcoin is, do you see kind of a transition where states either like they embrace Bitcoin, they embrace kind of freedom, or they don't, and then there's just this polarity between states just continues to increase, kind of that the states become more decentralized by embracing a freedom technology?
Sure, I hope so, right? I mean, like, I've said this before, I think all Bitcoin maximalists should be 10th Amendment maximalists, right? In that the states have a big role to play. Wyoming has, did and is continuing to take the lead from like a legislative standpoint, from like a jurisdiction certainty standpoint. So there was Tyler Lindholm, one of the he was a state legislator at the time, started the blockchain task force. I served on that in 2019, along with other like citizens, non-legislators like Caitlin Long. And we just passed a bunch of bills that were basically trying to bring certainty to industry that wanted to work there, right? Or developers that wanted to contribute to the core protocol and be safe in that jurisdiction and immune from some of the nasty things that have been threatened in other jurisdictions towards them. And so that was kind of step one. And that's very, very important. And a lot of states have started to copy Wyoming's laws on this. However, step number two is industry, right? They do this because they want jobs and people in industry to move to the state. They want to attract us to be there. And Wyoming has so many things working for it, just like Texas does. It's a red state. It's open for business. It's very business friendly. They produce an enormous amount of power there. They have a lot of natural resources there, whether it's oil and gas or coal, which means that like for the mining industry, it's a attractive place. It's not on the same scale as Texas when it comes to that, but on the power production side, surprisingly, it is. Wyoming, I think, is the third largest power producing state in the United States, next to Texas and California. I believe it's I'm going to be wrong on this, but it's in the range of like 20 gigawatts or so. Now, all of that power, pretty much 90% of it is exported. That's powering Denver, that's powering Salt Lake and out west and everything like that. But I think it has 8 or 9 gigawatts just of coal power being generated there. Now, transmitting that power is super expensive and, all that type of stuff, but consuming it in the state should be a priority, right? The people that produce power, you make money doing that, but it's really the people that are consuming the power. That's where, where economic prosperity comes from. And so what I'm seeing in a small dose right now, what I want to see more of, hopefully, and I'm going to work on this in Wyoming in particular, is that we need to suck up and use that power in the state. And all the ingredients are basically there to do this, which is good.
Hey, friend. Thanks for listening. If you really enjoy this podcast, it would be really appreciated if you left us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple, or subscribe to our content on YouTube. This helps us get to a larger reach and a larger audience to spread this wonderful free education.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's something that I think is there. It is ripe for the taking, but I haven't really seen a ton of, like companies or businesses move in. And now we got Caitlin Long and Custodia, but there's not a ton else from what I mean, there's some small mining projects ongoing. But it would be
mostly straight at gas type stuff. And stuff like that.
Yeah, it would be great to see more. And this is not an advertisement to move to Wyoming, but kind of it's a great state.
We'll take a few people.
We'll take sovereign individuals for sure. So that's the right people, right? And what kind of laws or legislation? I didn't really get into it too much with Caitlin. We mostly talked about Custodia and hunting, actually, but what kind of legislation did you guys pass? Because people always say, Wyoming's so friendly for legislation. Like, what actually was passed there? Or what did you influence that you think is actually a difference maker for companies or for just Bitcoin holders in general?
Well, I'll preface this with saying that like someone like Caitlin did way more than I did, and Tyler Lindholm and those guys. I was there. My role was basically to call bullshit on all the shitcoiners who came to testify and fill us with their lies and their decentralized identity schemes and all these crazy things.
An important role.
Yes. And back then, honestly, Trace Mayer was doing that as well. I know he's persona non grata, but he did a great job in Wyoming. And he played that role as well, testifying publicly, focusing things on what actually matters. I would say I'll take a couple things. So why Custodia is in Wyoming is something called the SPDI, the Special Purpose Depository Institution. It was a corporate formation that was created where Caitlin and Tyler were super influential in setting this up, which is essentially a financial institution. It's a bank that is recognized on both the state and federal level. That's a non-lending institution, right? And so it's not governed by the FDIC because it doesn't lend, right? But it can do all the other things that a bank can do, right? And there's a lot of benefits to being a bank as a company formation. And Wyoming invented it. In fact, Wyoming invented LLCs as well. But not only did, with the LLCs, Wyoming, that was back in the 70s, Wyoming had a problem, which is like everyone knows LLCs in Delaware now because that's where they're all registered because they have a chancery court set up. All the rule of law is built around Delaware law around these types of corporate formations. This time when we set up these SPDIs, these non-lending bank institutions, they can do custody and all these other things with Bitcoin, stable coins, anything else, is that we also funded like the chancery court system and things like that. Like we're trying to build case law in Wyoming so that Wyoming is the place that you would want to domicile and have your business. At the end of the day, while all this is supposed to be good for Bitcoin, right? It's also supposed to be good for Wyoming. Like it wants economic prosperity. And when they have the feds coming down on them and saying, no more coal mining on federal leases and stuff like that, that puts a big dent in what pays for the public services and things like that in Wyoming. So it needs people in industry to move there. And legislation like that are one of the ways that we're hoping to bring businesses to Wyoming. Now, I will say that Custodia in particular is in a fight with the feds right now, with the Fed right now, because they are not issuing what's basically colloquially called a Fed card to these SPDIs. They are required to do so, but they are not doing it right now. So I think once some of that gets ironed out, and bless Caitlin for fighting the good fight there, that you'll see more people doing that.
Yeah, and that's a good trend. I'm excited, and I definitely want to talk to Caitlin again next year. We had her on earlier, so we'll have to link that podcast. It was a really good one, and it's again paving the way, right? I think someone has to lead by example. So it's cool that you guys, Caitlin, Tyler, kind of really put that pedal to the metal in Wyoming, especially. And I'm super psyched about it. But again, I would love to see more Bitcoin businesses and things like that. But it's easy to get eager and impatient in the Bitcoin space, right?
Sure.
So and this is a great transition to your journey as well, from just like working at Unchained, now focusing on payments at Zaprite. And maybe we could get into that, but a high level first question is, what sort of, what Bitcoin companies do we need at a high level?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there's a lot, right? And so if you're talking about like the really tight circle around Bitcoin, when I was first transitioning out of my fiat job into, say, Unchained, the question I would ask myself is, if Bitcoin is money, what is the product of money? And the product of money is financial services, right? So Bitcoin, it invalidates and sort of wrecks not banks, but a bank, the central bank, the Fed. That's what Bitcoin wrecks. But like banking services, right, can exist on a Bitcoin standard. They will exist. They do exist, right? Now, do they look the same as the businesses, the banks in the fiat world? It's like, no. And the closer they look to the fiat world, the more likely there's a problem. So an example of that, when I started at Unchained, we had a lot of pressure externally to look like BlockFi because we did lending. We had a loan book. We can't look like BlockFi because we don't rehypothecate collateral. We keep collateral in a collaborative custody wallet where we have a key, a third party has a key, and the borrower has a key. Then we promise them we're not going to rehypothecate, meaning take that collateral and lend it out over and over again to make more yield. We don't do that, right? And our customers, our borrowers, can confirm that we're not doing it because they have a key to that vault, right? You take a look at BlockFi, like they're lending Bitcoin in the same way that you would lend other securities or deposits, right, from a bank. We know that can't work on a Bitcoin standard because there are no bailouts, there are no bail-ins, right? If you take risk with Bitcoin and it disappears, it's gone for good. There's no FDIC insurance. There's nothing of the sort. So what type of companies are going to sprout up around this is like, financial services and banking is going to be a thing, but it's going to necessarily look a lot different than these standard ones. What are the other services that banks do? Well, they do custody, they do lending, they do trade execution, they do all these types of things, right? All those things will exist, but the ones doing it as if they were operating on a fiat standard, they're all going to get wrecked, and they do every single week, every single year. It's FTX, it's Celsius, it's BlockFi. They're all trying to pretend as if Bitcoin is the same, and it's not. The Unchains of the world, I think, have the right idea. That was the goal, is that like, what does this look like if we try to take Bitcoin's native properties, right, and make sure that our customers are benefiting from that? Well, custody looks a lot different because the bank, us, we have no control over the funds. You do give up privacy, right? But the customer is sovereign over those funds. If we got a subpoena from the U.S. government that said freeze this person's funds, we literally could not do that, right? We could do other things, with a legal subpoena, but we couldn't move the funds, we couldn't freeze the funds because we don't have control over the funds. That's taking Bitcoin's native properties and building, a financial service solution around it, right? And there's going to be lots of things like that. You have the guys at Anchor Watch doing, doing insurance in a Bitcoin native way. You have other custody providers, Casa, things like that, doing it in a Bitcoin native way. And I think that, just like we see these with banks, there's going to be hundreds and thousands of these types of institutions, right? And it'll just look different.
Yeah, this is always an interesting discussion because, the hardcore Bitcoiners, like, they would say, a lot of them, that you don't need, custody for, someone to have custody over your Bitcoin, or partial custody, I guess, or
sure.
They're hardcore. And then there's a debate over the 3-3 multi-sig and privacy. Of course, KYC is a big topic,
Yep.
But I think it's right. I think Marty has talked about this many times.
Yeah. There's trade-offs to all of this, right? Like, that's what's great about Bitcoin is you don't need a custodian to help you on any of this stuff. There are certain considerations where I would even encourage some of these. I mean, I am a hardcore Bitcoiner, so like I am one, so I know how they think. Is that, if you have non-KYC Bitcoin, it's like, don't send it to a KYC custodian. Yeah. Okay. Now, what are the drawbacks of that? Well, inheritance of that Bitcoin is going to be a bitch. It's going to be difficult to deal with, both in terms of like the physical passing on to whoever your beneficiaries are and the legal structure around it, right? Look, I'm not trying to go to jail or anything here, but like also I'm not trying to say that one size fits all. Like, it's that for some of the Bitcoin that you have, a collaborative custody arrangement might make a lot of sense. For some of the Bitcoin you have, maybe, rolling your own multi-sig is much, much better, right? I think that's great. If you want to get liquidity for your Bitcoin without selling it, some of that Bitcoin, maybe you should get a loan from Unchained, right? If you don't want to do that, don't do it, right? I think it's pretty simple in those terms. But again, like, you have that sort of self-sovereign cypherpunk, angle, and that's available to anyone. The learning curve might be a little bit steeper, but even that, the user experience is coming down and down. Places like Nunchuck and stuff like that, it's fantastic. It's great. But again, there are certain things that are going to be very difficult to do. Buying Bitcoin, right? Just buying it, right? I was in New York City. I bought some Bitcoin off someone in Washington Square Park, handing them cash, but it's not such a great way to do it. So sometimes you have to go through certain rails, right? I'm not trying to say that all businesses will look like that, but I do think that you'll see like this banking, financial services world grow up around Bitcoin that looks familiar but is necessarily different. And then you'll have the cypherpunk world, operating in parallel with that. But then the other types of businesses, right, that aren't necessarily financial service businesses, right, the mining companies, the energy producers. Marty and I just talk about this driving back and forth from Houston is, what's going to happen first? Do the Bitcoin miners become energy producers, or do the energy producers become Bitcoin miners, right? And I think he said that a lot. But it's certainly easier for the energy producers to become Bitcoin miners, right? They have power plants, right? Those are hard things to get, hard assets to build, hard assets to buy. But the Bitcoin miners are doing pretty well, especially right now, right? They're going to buy these things, right? They're going to buy power plants. They're going to produce energy, and they're going to play the ancillary services and demand response games on the grids and stuff like that to earn cash. And then they're going to consume a lot of that energy on site, no transmission, mining Bitcoin. All this is going to happen, right? It is happening right now. So yeah, financial services, mining companies, insurance companies, it's all the same stuff. It's just a little bit, they're going to have to do it in a different way. Real estate, I'll tell you this much, they're not going to be building 70-story buildings in Austin. There's too much risk on that on a Bitcoin standard. They're going to have to build nice, beautiful architecture like the building we're in right now.
If you're a health-conscious food consumer who's also very active, you know how big of a struggle it is to find a bar that is both convenient and nutrient dense. That's why I was so excited when I discovered the Alpha Bar. The Alpha Bar is a meat-based bar that contains only simple ingredients, 100% grass-fed beef, tallow, and honey, and is both nutrient-dense and convenient, and packs a caloric punch of over 300 calories. For me, this was a game changer and is now the go-to snack and fuel source I use when I'm hiking, camping, hunting, skiing, or or doing anything in the outdoors and I don't have the resources to cook a full meal. The Alpa Bar is made proudly in Colorado and only uses locally sourced meat. JJ and Rob are also extremely based and accept Bitcoin for payment. I highly recommend you check out the Alpa Bar for any time you need a nutrient-dense and convenient snack on the go. Check them out at eatalpa.com and use code DRadio5 at checkout to get a 5% discount. And if you pay in Bitcoin, you can get an additional discount on top of that. That's eataupa.com and use code DRadio5 at checkout.
Yeah. Well, commercial real estate is not doing too hot right now either.
No.
So I'm excited about that paradigm, really, when you can let kind of the creativity and what actually makes sense when the incentives are aligned and the money is right. But I want to get in, I think exactly what you said about the financial services is it's spot on, because you want to give people the option and they can always choose to do, privacy, self-custody, and like you said, go that route. But I talked to Matt from Atomic Finance, and they're building out their own, DLC, using DLCs, getting some yield.
Very interesting.
Self-custody. It's cool.
It's very exciting.
There's products that people just want to have. Mm-hmm. And especially if we want to get more and more people on board, they're going to want something equivalent to whatever they have in the fiat world. And it's just going to make it easy, or, somewhat, not equivalent exactly, but similar.
I think instead of equivalent, think familiar, right? Because user experience really does matter, right? In software and all this stuff, right? And it's that, like, I like to think of things as like, how can I make this look familiar to someone, even though it's very, very different underneath the hood, right? So, that could be something as trivial as setting up a wallet, or it could be, sending a transaction. It's like, if someone's used to, paying with their credit cards, well, now we have tap signers. If someone's used to sending ACHs and wires, it's like we can adjust how we're sending Bitcoin transactions to look familiar, even though under the hood, everything's very, very different. I don't think that that's wrong at all. Take the things that work and don't take the things that don't.
Yeah, and obviously you and Parker were at Unchained and did really well for a few years. I think the financial services space is going to continue to grow. I think it's in a good space, but where do you assess it at, like, currently, and think it's going to be at in 5 to 10 years, the whole, I guess, industry of financial services?
I think it's matured a lot very quickly. So in 2019, when I joined Unchained, multi-sig, if you weren't a core developer or someone who'd been around for a long time, you didn't know what it was, and you certainly didn't do it. There was a point in late 2020, early 2021 where that seemed to change, right? Unchained and Casa were leading the way on this from like a company standpoint, but there were also great open source things happening at the same time. And it became something where I think that people were very intimidated by it or didn't understand it at all. And came to be sort of normalized and suggested and promoted by Bitcoin influencers and things like that like, it turns out just having your stuff on a single sig, hardware wallet, Trezor, Cold Card, whatever, maybe not the best idea. Maybe you should look into this multi-sig thing. And then these companies making it easier and easier and easier every single month to do so, I think played a big role in that. So where do I see this going? Is it like, the custody side has matured a lot. The lending side, not as much, mostly because it's hard to source dollars, right? With inflation and rates the way they are, it's like, you're forced to offer a loan at 15%. A lot of people don't want that. I get it. But like, whoever's lending you the dollars has to get it from somewhere. And so like, the source of dollars for Bitcoin collateralized loans is been kind of retarded recently. I mean that in both senses of the word. But eventually, I think...
And the volatility of Bitcoin, it makes it...
Doesn't matter.
No?
Nah, it's easy. We've been lending at Unchained since 2017. We've gone through every single crash you can imagine, right? From 20,000 to 3,500, from 60,000 to 16,000. It's like, yeah, you deal with liquidations and things like that, but you're not losing any money, like on behalf of people that are lending out dollars. Like, the volatility is not really an issue. It's an issue for a borrower to like.
That's what I was going to
Yeah.
say. I think from the user side of things, it
Yeah,
maybe,
it
like,
can be
puts them
scary.
off
But like,
to-
I always talk to people, I never took out a Bitcoin loan. Don't want to, don't need to. My whole theory on this is, dollars aren't that hard to get. I hear they're making more of them, so I'll go get them somewhere else. Right. But for some people, I get it. It's a, if you're Bitcoin rich and cash poor, like these can be godsends. You can buy a house, you can start a business, you can pay your bills, you can do things with this. Right. And long-term bets of Bitcoin's appreciation, probably not the worst idea. I've been tempted before, but I just haven't done it. Right. What I think that, so when I talk to people that take out these loans, it's like way over collateralized, like embarrassingly over collateralized, right? Or keep a lot of dry powder around to meet margin calls and things like that, because 50% drops happen, right? And you need to be willing to, people that want to day trade and leverage buy and play on the edge, God bless you. But like I would, good luck is the right response there, right? It's like, I'm not interested in those games and I'm not interested in advising people on those games, but just needing cash. Look, I mean, the world runs on it right now. It's like, I get it. I think what's actually going to change there is that Bitcoin collateralized loans are mispriced. They're mispriced from the perspective of the people that have dollars, think that, a home in Cincinnati is better collateral than Bitcoin. Try selling a home in Cincinnati and then try selling, 3 Bitcoin. It's a big difference. Bitcoin's a lot more liquid. It's a lot easier. It's a much safer asset. It's way better collateral than any house in anywhere, right? And yet the dollars that are flowing in are much more expensive. I just think it's a mispriced thing, and it'll change over time.
Yeah, the market will eventually correct itself.
Yeah, it's basically, there is risk. There's nothing without risk, right? But that risk right now, I would say, is 2-3x better than, say, like a mortgage.
I'm excited to see how that goes, and it is very tempting, especially when you just see all the forces behind the Bitcoin momentum right now. And it's just ripping by the day currently. But it's interesting to see your perspective on all this, because you and Parker were a big part of this maturation of the financial services industry, and then you guys decided to go to Zaprite.
Yeah.
Did you realize that payments were a big gap to fill in terms of Bitcoin adoption? Or walk me through maybe that inflection point.
Sure.
How you guys decided to go that route, or why?
Yeah, I mean, when we left Unchained, it was really, we knew we wanted to work together, and we were just thinking about, like, obviously it's going to be in Bitcoin. Where can we add value, right? There was something to the story, though, of thinking about, like, well, custody. There was a reason we worked on custody to start with Unchained, was that we had to get that right first. If Bitcoin can't be safe at rest, then nothing else really matters, right? And so adding to that story with a lot of other companies and a lot of other products, like, we felt like the custody story it will continue to get better, but it was pretty good. Pretty much anyone, especially in the United States, that wants to custody their own Bitcoin, use collaborative custody, they have very good options, right? And if that is true, then what's kind of the next step? And we looked at it and saying, there's acquiring Bitcoin or getting Bitcoin or earning Bitcoin. Like, how do I get Bitcoin? Well, I pretty much just have to buy it on an exchange right now. What about earning it? Well, the first question is, if you're going to earn Bitcoin, is where does it go and how do I keep it safe? Check. That's solved. Unchained, Casa, any place, Cold Card, Nunchuck, all these great options. It's like, okay, all right. Well, then what are the mechanisms in which I earn this Bitcoin? Like, how do I get it? How does it actually work? So we looked around at the products out there, OpenNode and BTC Pay Server and all these things. Played with all of them. Great products, right? But I like what I call like in-between products. So Unchained was very much an in-between product, where on one extreme you have, keep things at Gemini or Coinbase or FTX, right? Not great. On the other end, over here is, roll everything yourself, right? sometimes I do that personally for some Bitcoin, but not for all of it. Unchained was kind of in the middle thing, saying like, well, we can give you some of the benefits of Bitcoin, like sovereignty, right? Which I think is the most important one, censorship resistance. You're going to lose some of it, privacy, right? Unchained's going to know your balance, things like that. So there were gives and takes. When I looked at the payments world, I saw on one end over here, OpenNode, BitPay, that type of thing, right? Actually great products, right? However, when I analyze those products, I think of them more as exchanges, right? Their main thing is saying like Bitcoin accepted here, but actually I want dollars. So like take in the Bitcoin, exchange it for dollars, spit out dollars on the other end. And that's not that's not what I want personally. I look at the other end, BTC Pay Server, fabulous project, right? Fabulous product. However, again, there are certain trade-offs I wanted to make. It's like, well, I like that, but I don't want to run a server. The server's overhead for the little things I want to do. For a lot of people, it's perfect for what they do. Awesome. What I wanted was just that, like, I have a wallet. I like my wallet. I like my multiple custody setups, right? And if I'm going to put up a web store, I would just want the Bitcoin to go to that wallet. That's it, right? Pretty simple idea. And we looked around and we couldn't find anybody doing anything like that. And then we remembered Zaprite, John McGill's company. And it was not doing like e-commerce type stuff, but it was doing invoicing, business invoicing. And there was one page in particular that caught our eye, which was he has a connections page where it's like add in your Bitcoin wallet or add in your Strike or, you know, whatever, right? And I was just like, oh, this is it. This is the whole back end for like the e-commerce stuff we want to do. I wonder if he's thinking about that as well. So instead of just starting another company, Parker and I went and talked to John. We're like, hey, we've been thinking about this. And he's like, I've been thinking about that too. Right. And we're like, well, why don't we kind of join forces instead of just, you know, not necessarily competition's not bad or anything, but like if we have the same vision for this, like, you know, we should do this together. And the whole concept there is kind of this in-between business where all we're doing is building. We're like a dumb pipe. We build interfaces, whether that be invoicing or e-commerce, between your wallet, the merchant, and your customer's wallet, the buyer. We don't touch any Bitcoin. There's no transaction fees. There's no custody changing hands. It just goes from your customer's wallet to your wallet. That's it. And that's all I wanted. And it didn't exist. So we built it.
Yeah, I mean, the more I'm actually like launching businesses and looking into accepting Bitcoin for payment. Well, first off, let me start by I've accepted Bitcoin for my book and
Sure.
I've sold Bison for Bitcoin. And it's a challenge, but it's also, the payment side of things can be a little difficult with, even if you're just using Lightning or the BTC Pay server I looked into and I was like, oh, wow, that's like a lot going on there. So I totally agree. I think it's the way you laid that out makes total sense because these in-between products that are really offering a lot of sovereignty, but it's not the hardcore DIY stuff. Is really, it's probably the bulk. You know, the bulk of people are in the middle, right?
Yeah. I think there's markets on through the whole spectrum, right? OpenNode's not going to lose customers to us, and BTC Pay Server is definitely not going to lose customers to us because people that want to do that need to do that, right? And we're not trying to take anyone from there, right? But again, for me or you, it's like, I might have a use for BTC Pay Server in the future, but right now, it's just overhead, right? And so I just wanted this simple thing, right? And again, what's the trade-off? It's like, well, I'm not running my own server. There's a trade-off in that, right? However, I am getting these other things I'm not getting on the other end with OpenNode, which is like, I have my own wallet. I can audit all this stuff myself. That's really, really nice. And I don't have to change a lot because I just drop an XPub in, or I drop my Strike account in, or soon we'll have River and stuff like that. Like there'll be custodial, non-custodial. Think of us as wallet agnostic. We don't care, right? We don't care if you're custodial, non-custodial, Lightning, or on-chain. We just want you to accept Bitcoin, right? On your own terms, right? And some people that onboard in a custodial way, using Strike or River or something like that, they'll move over to their single sig or multi-sig. We have Unchained, for instance, you can drop in your wallet configuration and it'll go straight to your cold storage vault. That's pretty fucking cool, right? Now, when you were talking about like simplicity though, is I think about it on two layers. One is yes, if you want people to accept Bitcoin, it has to be at least as easy as accepting dollars, right? So what do you do to accept dollars right now? You set up a Venmo, or you set up a Stripe, or you set up a Cash App, or something like that.
This episode is brought to you by Wyoming Based, my new apparel company that is focused on providing high quality natural fiber based products using 100% US supply chains. Our first two products, the 100% wool everyday beanie and 100% wool rib sweater, are proudly made right here in Wyoming using local wool. The wool is low itch, high quality and durable, naturally antimicrobial, and way better for your health and the health of the planet. If you want to support a local US brand and are tired of supporting woke outdoors companies that shill plastics, check us out at wyomingbase.com and pre-order your sweater and beanie today.
It's not too difficult, right?
QR code or username.
Yeah. It takes 10 minutes or whatever to get all the accounts set up and everything like that. So we want to make that the equivalent on Zaprite. So it has to be at least as good there. It can't be worse, or else people won't do it. And then there's the payment side of like, what does it actually mean to pay in Bitcoin? Now, we have some control over that and how we build our workflows for e-commerce and invoice payments. And then like the wallets themselves have to do their jobs. But like, if it's less friction to pay with Bitcoin than it is to pay with fiat, then we're going to win not just on the Bitcoin terms, we're going to win on usability terms. And I think it's very important for anyone building software around Bitcoin that you win on both fronts, right? And so right now, when I look at Zaprite, is like a lot of people, you can set up fiat options on Zaprite. You can take dollars along with your Bitcoin. We think that's still important for a lot of merchants. Not everyone, but some people are like, guys, we need some dollars. Okay, fine. So you can set up a Stripe, or you can do ACH transfers, and we'll have things like Cash App and Venmo here soon. Is that we have a direct comparison now, which is like, okay, I have dollars in my, I have a credit card for Stripe payments, right? And I have a Bitcoin wallet, right? Which one's easier? And right now, I can tell you straight up, it is way easier to pay a Lightning payment on Zaprite than it is to put in your credit card information. It's just better. So on the usability front, we're already getting ahead, right? And on the merchant front, we're pretty close at this point. Like, it's a dead heat, I'll put it that way. But once we get both of those, then I think that the adoption curve will change quite a bit.
So I've used Zaprite to pay my podcast editor.
Okay.
So I paid invoices, but I'm curious from the e-commerce perspective, like how would you go about easily setting up that integration on maybe any website?
Yeah.
Say Shopify store. Like
Sure.
Whatever.
Yeah, so in its current state, we have a thing called payment links. If you've used Stripe, you're familiar with the idea. You can basically set up a little store on Zaprite right now. They're dead simple, right? They're bare bones. It's single SKU, single product. I'm selling a book. Okay, create that, put a picture next to it, a description of the product. You price it, then you go through and you hook up your wallet, basically saying, you can pay me on Lightning and on Chain and with dollars via Stripe. And then you just have this nice little page called a payment link, which is, basically something you can put out publicly saying like, this is my product. This is what I'm selling. I'm selling these hats or this books or, whatever. But that's not a serious store. And Zaprite's not going to build serious stores. We're going to integrate with Shopify and WooCommerce. So the WooCommerce one should be out in about 2 weeks, right? That was the first big integration we're doing. Shopify is a little bit more difficult. If WooCommerce is Android, Shopify is Apple. It's a little bit more closed down. It's a little bit harder to get through their app store, good graces. But, we can obviously do it, and we will. And so that'll be early next year. And so that means that if you have, a store on Shopify or a store on WooCommerce, you'll just be able to download the plugin, the Zaprite plugin, and you're off to the races, right? Now, I'll point out that Zaprite, we'll build little things like payment links to get people onboarded and started, but we're not interested in building the templates. We're not interested in building a Shopify, clone or something like that. Those are really big businesses, and they're focused on how to convert users through checkouts, and they're focused on how to, you have beautiful, landing pages and all that stuff. Is we're just focused on Bitcoin payments. We want to be the best at that, right? And we'll integrate where you are. Now we're at the early days of that, but by mid next year, we'll have all the biggest platforms there, and so be rare that you have a store somewhere that we couldn't integrate with.
Do you need those integrations to do that, or could you do it a manual way before, say, the Shopify plugin is available?
You could do it in a manual way. We have these little embed things for like the buttons.
A link.
Yeah,
yep.
You can embed a button or something like that. I just did it. I just started a blog. I started writing about software development in Bitcoin. And I have a little tip button at the bottom that's a Zaprite link that says "Tip me in Bitcoin." You hit it, and it goes to a payment link where you go to Zaprite and you can pay. So there's workarounds for that for sure right now. Or if you're Jimmy and he does a lot of point of sale stuff, like Zaprite's not the point. We haven't done point of sale yet, but he's printed out these QR codes that lead to payment links. It's actually sorry, I'm saying Jimmy Song, who has a new book out right now. Fiat Ruins Everything. He's been using Zaprite to process payments for his book. And so you can do little point of sale hacks and stuff like that right now. I'm just saying like sort of the native integrations where if you have, if you have a big professional store on Shopify, there's a lot of things Shopify can do for you that makes that store work, right? And convert, and they have all these tools. We're just going to go to them, right? That's what we're going to do. And until then, try us out with some of the other things. The business invoicing is a very robust product. Like you can't really do what we do anywhere else. Like use that, try a couple of your products on the payment links and stuff like that, and then we'll get to you.
That makes sense. I guess with the manual link, would there be a way to have that confirmation like routed back? Like say you're selling a digital product.
That's what's
like,
tough.
Yeah, the access. Yeah. That's because I'm actually launching a website.
We are going to do that, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking like, I could embed a link and then they could pay it. But I was like, how would they,
how do we do a fulfillment of this digital content?
How would the website know that then they've paid it?
Yeah, that's what's nice about doing the native integrations is that like if you're just
that feedback loop is there, right?
Yeah, if you're plugging in some HTML or something like that, like you don't get the feedback loop. So like we need to do the native integrations. We are going to do them. But even to your point, like on a payment link, fulfilling digital content, and like gatekeeping it until something's paid and then being able to display it, that'll actually be there pretty soon. We're working on that right now.
That's awesome. Wow, I'm so excited because it does make it a lot easier. And yeah, like I said, I got a few things that I'm launching that I want to accept Bitcoin for payment for because it opens up this whole new market, right? If you're that, whatever space you're in, if you're accepting Bitcoin for payment, you're opening up yourself to a whole community that's pretty, I would say I'm curious to get your feedback is on how willing Bitcoiners are to spend their sats, because I see this slow increase, and in the past couple of years, definitely more of an increase in terms of people willing to pay for things with Bitcoin.
I hate paying for things with Bitcoin, which is ironic since, we're doing Zaprite. The point is that it's not really up to us, right? It's the people that make things. They get to decide how they get paid, right? If you have a store, if you're selling bison, if you're selling art, if you're doing whatever, you can be paid in Bitcoin, right? You just have to demand it, right? So I like to think of it as like Bitcoin preferred versus Bitcoin accepted, right? Is that if I'm signaling to you that I want Bitcoin, maybe I won't even have a fiat option, or maybe the fiat option is 20% more expensive, right? And then me as a payer, I have to decide whether or not, I'm going to take that 20% hit or if I'm going to pay with Bitcoin. Most of the times I'll pay with Bitcoin, right? So like, I don't mean to be flippant about this. Like, I understand why people don't want to spend their Bitcoin. I don't either, right? But it's coming for you, right? If Bitcoin's money, you're going to spend money, right? And it's not a chicken or the egg thing, right? So this is a dual-sided marketplace. You have a merchant, someone selling something, and then someone buying something. There's a lot of other dual-sided, two-sided markets, right? Dating. You have a woman and you have a man, or job.
Oh, I don't know about that everywhere today. That's a big question.
We're not going to get into that, right? You got a woman and a man. Or you have like a job board. You have an employer and a job seeker, right? These dual-sided markets. Dating is very obvious, right? Like what drives people to dating apps? Hot girls, right? There's one side of the market that matters and another side of the market that matters but doesn't matter as much, right? If you have hot girls, then men will show up. On the job side, if you have great jobs, right, the people are going to show up. So in dual-sided markets, you always have to prioritize one side of it. We've prioritized merchants, right? Saying that like in this chicken or the egg problem, well, how do we solve for it, right? Are people going to really spend their Bitcoin? It's like, no, it's just like people are going to want Bitcoin for the same reasons that they buy it, right? They're going to they've made a balance sheet decision in their personal life, right? Saying, I want Bitcoin. Well, why pay the exchange fees and all that stuff over here when I can just sell my work, my time, my art, my whatever, and just get Bitcoin on a direct basis, right? That's a much more, seamless way to fulfill the balance sheet decision I made for myself. Now, I'm saying that as if I'm a independent proprietor, this is a closely held business, type thing. I do think that's where this starts, right? A lot of our clients are dentists, that own their own practice, or lawyers that own their own practice, and they get to invoice their customers in Bitcoin if they want, right? One of the dentists that came on board and started doing this, I got a message from one of their clients just being like, holy crap, I just paid for my dental stuff in Bitcoin. It was so much cheaper to do it that way. And that's because the dentist decided to show his preference. Is like, I want Bitcoin. All right, so that starts at closely held businesses, right? But those smaller businesses become bigger businesses over time. Those people go work at bigger businesses. Like, it all happens, but it starts with pay me in Bitcoin. That's how it starts.
I think it's brilliant, and it's something I'm eager to do because, I've sold books and Bison for Bitcoin, and, some of the Bison I sold, it's like I made a good chunk of Bitcoin, and I'm like, I want to do more of this. Like, I want to accept it and, provide people a discount, incentivize them because, like you said, people aren't going to, like, want to stray away. Well, there's more and more people who are, like, happy to pay with Bitcoin because I think they know that it's, like, supporting the community of like-minded individuals, but it has to be good product. Like, the value has.
You can't rely on altruism.
No, you can't. Yeah. But that's why the discount or the markup for fiat, as Parker likes to say, I guess, is really just such an easy way. So I'm excited to.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, if the thing you want will only take Bitcoin, right, or will take Bitcoin with a punishment for fiat. It's like, well, you'll start spending Bitcoin. And that's a good thing overall, right? Bitcoin is money and we want to see these things, but it's also an individual thing, right? Is that you hear people talking about circular economies and stuff like that. All we're talking about is a series of individual decisions, right? And those individual decisions compound over time. And it starts out where the Cole family, we've been on a Bitcoin standard for years. If I owe my brother money or my dad owes me money or something like that, we just settle up in Bitcoin. It's the way we've always done it, right? Always done it. It's the way we've done it for the past 7 years or so, right? So I've operated on a Bitcoin standard with my family. We pay each other that way. But like, that's an individual decision that then is extended to some of my friends, right? Where I owe them for fantasy football or something like that. And they say, hey, don't send me dollars, send me Bitcoin, right? All these individual decisions start making. Now, to me, it looks like I live in this little bubble of a circular economy, but it's been in the works for 7 years, right? All these individual decisions started compounding on each other. So with Zaprite, what we're betting on is that a lot more people have already made that individual decision and just haven't enacted it yet, or will be making that decision soon. And we're going to build tooling around it to make it easy for you to make that decision. Because it's not just about accepting Bitcoin as the merchant, is that if I have obligations in Bitcoin, say I'm getting invoiced over here by one of my suppliers saying like, I'll give you a 20% discount to pay in Bitcoin, right? Because that person's made their individual decision. Now it makes a lot more sense for me to start taking some Bitcoin so I can pay my supplier in that instead of going and buying it somewhere else, right? All these individual decisions, again, compounding on each other. That's what builds a circular economy. It doesn't just pop into existence. And it's not something that you just sort of wait to happen. You see it happen slowly but surely with all those decisions being made by individuals.
Yeah. And gradually then suddenly, right?
Sure.
How does Zaprite make money? Or did you just take a 1% of?
No, we don't do any transaction fees. It didn't feel right for us. Sorry, I cut you off there.
No, you're fine. Because I was going to say, I think Stripe is like 2% or something on credit cards.
Yeah. And then the credit card fee itself from the, it adds up, 4% or so. No, so we price ourselves like SaaS software. So we are not a payment processor. Again, there's no custody. Stripe takes custody of the dollars and then they pay you out the dollars. Since we're not really processing transactions, it felt weird to charge a processing fee. What we're doing is we're providing you software. And so we charge like a SaaS company would, which is roughly, I think it's $25 a month or $240 a year. You can pay in Bitcoin or in dollars. You can pay we're about to put in our penalty for paying in dollars. We haven't done it yet just because we want to grandfather some of our monthly payers and give them, time to understand that we're going to start punishing them for paying us with dollars, because we would prefer the Bitcoin. But we charge this monthly or yearly subscription to use the software, and then you can do your invoicing and your payment links, and in the future your integrations at will.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. I kind of like that better as well. I think it's better probably from the merchant perspective also.
I hope so.
Probably. I mean, if you're actually selling things of value, or you're running a lot of volume. But
well, you know what you're paying for, right? Yeah. Is you're just paying to use our software, and we build software and then we sell you the software, right? We're not trying to take a cut of your business necessarily. These transaction fees. It's really funny. I've never been that close to like the finance world. I've always been building the software, but in any place. So like, whether it was StackOverflow or Unchained, I never really saw the money coming in when people paid with credit cards, but at Zaprite, I do see it, right? Because just a few of us there. And I'm like, well, what the hell? These guys are paying us $25 a month, but we only got $23. Like, I've never seen, I've always, of course, known these processing fees are there. I've never just seen it hit a bank account, and it pissed me off.
It's pretty bad. It's really bad. I just kind of discovered this, kind of thought more about it as, building out more e-commerce or membership type things. And yeah, something we talked about earlier though is merchants can be hesitant to, I guess, accept Bitcoin for payment. I'm going through this right now with my business partner because we want to accept Bitcoin. I really want to accept Bitcoin. But when you have like a really serious business, people get concerned about taxes of things. So we talked about this earlier a bit, but maybe you could walk through how that works in, taxes for a business, for a merchant, and reporting it. Based on what you said earlier, if you just keep it in Bitcoin, all you have to do is report it as income, and then that's it. And Zaprite helps with that in an easy way.
Yeah. So I'll preface this with, I'm not an accountant or a tax lawyer or anything like that. Consult Satoshi Pacquioli if you want the real deal, and you should interview him. Actually, he's great on this stuff. But yeah, if you're accepting Bitcoin as payment, right? Like you do have just like accepting anything as payment, and you have an obligation, or you may have the obligation depending on what jurisdiction you're in. But if you're in Austin, Texas, you certainly have an obligation to report that income and pay taxes on it. But again, if you made this balance sheet decision, holding that over years, there's no tax consequences or anything like that. If you have to sell it to get liquidity because you have obligations in dollars, yes, sometimes there is a tax consequence. If the Bitcoin has appreciated in dollar terms during that time, you now have a capital gain, right? If the Bitcoin has stayed the same, you don't, right? And you're fine. Or if it has gone down in value, you now have a capital loss, which you can then, write off towards future capital gains for your business or individually. So, there are tax consequences, but it's not that complicated. And what Zaprite does for you basically is that if you take in Bitcoin, we'll give you like a CSV download, right? That basically has every information about every transaction that you could ever want, including the accounting information that you need on the currency. Like what was the precise, cost of this item in Bitcoin at the time? What was the value of Bitcoin at the time? What was the exchange rate, at that time? So you have all the information you need. You can plug that into any competent, accounting software and figure out what your taxes are owed, or you can give it to someone like Satoshi Pacquioli and they'll figure it out for you.
That's really cool. So it's more so on the merchant side of things than where.
The merchant side of things is really easy. Yeah. Now on the
the payment
on the buyer, the consumer. The merchant side is not that big of a deal. Now on the payment side, there's other things there, right? And so there's some things on the federal level that are being worked on to have like a de minimis exception. Say $600 or below. Like there's no tax event, and like just paying this. That's one of the things that Cynthia Lummis's bill is focused on. We'll see how that goes. It's not law today. But yeah, when you pay with Bitcoin, you may or may not be incurring a capital gain or a capital loss at that time. So you should talk to your tax consultant about that.
Yeah, that's right. It's so interesting. I think it's good. Well, it's great feedback for me personally. And I'm just excited to see how it all grows, because it seems like Zaprite's going to make it a lot easier for people to accept payments. And then again, if the Bitcoiners are running businesses or just anyone, gives the customer that hard decision that maybe they'll consider buying Bitcoin as well. And obviously another bull market will accelerate that. So yeah, where do you think the daily use of Bitcoin is just really going to grow quite a bit from here on out?
It has to. Look, Bitcoin store of value story is I think very well known, understood, and obvious at this point. We've been banging that drum for a long time. It's not going to change. It's never going to change. That's the whole point of it. That's why the store of value story is so strong, is that it can't change. Okay, but Bitcoin is still money, and you can do other things with money. So yeah, of course I see this changing. Now, the timing of it is very important, right? I do think that the timing right now for a company like Zaprite, yeah, we'll see it grow. Is it as big as it's going to be in 10 years? Like, no, of course not. Like, these things happen very gradually, right? But I see a lot of those individual decisions being made, right? Bitcoiners have companies and they want more Bitcoin, right? We're going to help them get it. And it's happening right now. There's tens of thousands of people that want that, if not hundreds of thousands, and pretty soon there will be millions. When I say pretty soon, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. It could be next year. It could be 2 years after that, just like with collaborative custody and multisig, right? When we launched the product, no one wanted it, right? And then a year and a half later, and I didn't know it was going to be a year and a half later, everyone wanted it, right? And so with this type of thing, I think I'm pretty good at timing these things, even though I don't have a crystal ball. It's like, I'm pretty sure within a year and a half, everyone's going to want this.
Yeah, because everyone's going to want Bitcoin in a year and a half, because it might be $200,000 at this rate. Who knows? Price is irrelevant specifically, but it's something that's been such a strong criticism of Bitcoin. People like Nick Carter, whoever, and the USDC is used like a ton in other countries, and it makes sense, and the circumstances are different than here. But I think it's just a matter of time with the right products and services to allow that monetary exchange, the circular economy, to actually grow.
Yeah, again, it's a gradual process of individual decisions. You'd have to be pretty blind not to see these individual decisions being made. Like, open your fucking eyes. I would say to any critics on this, and I know a lot of critics on this, a lot of Bitcoiners that think this way, is that, like, first of all, it doesn't matter, right? Don't spend your Bitcoin. I don't care, right? I see a lot of people willing to do it, and I see a lot of people that want it, right? And so I'm going to build products for them. I think that even those people on a long enough time scale would admit, with what's going on with Lightning and eCash and things like that, that like Bitcoin is going to be transacted. They might disagree with that or maybe they don't. I don't know. I'm not a mind reader, but the type of criticisms I've read, I found to be entirely unconvincing. Based off of the very real evidence I have of launching Zaprite.
So you have the invoices nailed down. You get the e-commerce kind of next year. Where does Zaprite go from there?
Well, the e-commerce story has a long way to go, right? It's not just these integrations with the big online stores and stuff like that. There's ticketing systems, and there's meetup systems, and there's all sorts of like payment systems outside of just storefronts that we want to get to, right? It'll take time to do all those, but there's very obvious, peer-to-peer applications here of just like, how do I send you Bitcoin right now without an invoice in between? How do I just zap you money? A lot of that's happening on Nostr right now. You could see a wallet, a sort of network of wallets that we're setting up of just my wallet and your wallet, and like, oh, I don't have to send you an invoice. I can just type in your name. There's peer-to-peer implications in all this as well. So there's a lot of things we can do with this sort of idea that all we're trying to do is connect your wallet to someone else's wallet. The conditions in which we do it right now are for business invoicing and for e-commerce, but any other reason that you would send someone else money, we can conceivably do.
Is that where the name Zaprite, is that like the same Zapp? Is that what started that, or is this completely different from John?
John named it, and he named it well prior to Zapp's on Nostr. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I figured, because that's relatively new. I mean,
Yeah.
Nostr's like past year.
Yeah, Zapp's are probably February, March of this year is when Zapp's sort of, because it's like most people are getting onto Nostr and Christmas last year, so about a year ago. So yeah, it's within this year that Zapp's, that terminology really took hold.
That's kind of a funny coincidence then.
Yeah.
It might align really
Hey,
well.
it's great. Yeah,
Have
I
you
like
used Nostr at
Yeah.
all? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a very old InPub. Yeah, I'm gonna try to.
I go in these waves.
I'm gonna hipster you here, which is like, I got like an August of last year InPub. Justin Moon told me about it. I didn't start using it until December, right? Along with a lot of people, I started using it for real on the Damas test flight stuff right around Christmas, and I've used Damas and Primal and all sorts of stuff. I think it's great. Unlike my business partner, I'm bullish on Nostr.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
He's not.
Hates it.
I think I joined the first time.
I meant Parker, not John.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
I meant I joined like Feb or January last year or this year.
Yeah.
With Ben Justman convinced me to get on there.
Oh,
but then
that's great.
I got on there. I was like, this isn't really that great. I couldn't upload pictures, blah, blah, blah. And then I went back on a few, maybe late summer this year, and it was a lot better. And then I started using it, but it comes and goes in waves for me. It's just, I'm trying to minimize social media use. It's like just another platform. It's a challenge. And I'm not trying to just do like copy and paste. Like, hey, everything I post on Twitter, I'm just going to post here. But I'm going to get back into it. And yeah, I think it's great. I interviewed McShane.
Yeah.
Who does a lot of the Nostr stuff. And yeah, I also didn't realize till I talked to him just how it can be a platform for so many things, like marketplaces and then e-commerce.
And that's what I'm interested in.
That would
like
be
what the
really
Mutiny
cool.
guys sitting right here next to us are doing on Nostr with like subscription payments and things like that. That's super interesting. Social media, again, it's like, it's good for some things, and Nostr can do it. And that's the first iteration or the first popular use of Nostr, but it's not the only thing that can be built there. There is, in the name, other stuff, right, than just notes, right? And what the Mutiny guys are doing, I think, is very credible and interesting in terms of like a way to use Nostr with Bitcoin payments. And that's not just zapping people's profiles and stuff like that. The social media stuff is interesting, but unlike you, it's like I'm not really looking to do more social media necessarily, right? Although I do appreciate what they're building in that it is to my mind, a credible censorship-resistant way to build social media, which I think we do need and is important, even though it's not like the main thing I want in the world.
Yeah, no, totally. So they're building, maybe I'll have to go talk to them after this.
Yeah, go talk to them right after this. Yeah.
It's like subscription payment, like for maybe a membership or anything.
Yeah. And like they're doing it over Nostr. In fact, I've been promised a demo because I don't know exactly how it works yet, but Tony and all these guys, Ben and them, they get some cool stuff they're cooking up there.
Yeah, it's cool because I just launched some group coaching in terms of the health, decentralized health community. And it's like you're looking at these platforms and school and Patreon or Facebook groups, or you could use Telegram, but then I was like, Nostr would be perfect for this.
Yeah, imagine.
Same with just podcasts.
Are you familiar with Defense Distributed? Cody Wilson's.
I've heard of Cody Wilson.
He's based here in Austin.
Okay.
And Defense Distributed, they made the Ghost Gunner. And they tried to finance it, the original one, through Patreon.
Yeah.
And Patreon shut them off, right?
Yeah.
They censored those
that's right. He's the gun guy.
Yeah,
yes.
the gun guy,
yes,
right?
My friend told me about that.
And so they thought about, I think they launched something called Hatreon, which was, for all the hateful people out there. But something like that, yes, could be built on Nostr and not be subject to the same types of censorship that happens on Patreon. I think Patreon's fine, but like if you're doing, it's gun, it's pornography, guns. It could be selling MAGA hats or something like that. It's like perfectly legal things to do that they don't allow it. That's their right, but it's also our right to build, marketplaces that can't be censored in that way. And I think those are very important to build.
And they also take a huge chunk, and then you got Stripe on top of that too. It's
Sure. Yeah.
at
Then you got the
level.
fees and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
yeah. If you're taking Lightning, it's like, it looks a lot better. It's not feeless, but it's not that.
I'm really excited about that. And then the podcasting, kind of just live streaming, because obviously,
Sure.
I mean, God, the conversations I've had today probably will get taken down or potentially flagged on YouTube, and some of the podcasting apps are okay, but yeah,
Sure.
Nostr, I'm really excited. I don't want to like spend a ton of time there right now, but I'm trying to like check in and see how things are going. Cause
Yeah, I think
really
it's
cool.
worth keeping tabs on, right? Like, I'll compare it to like, when I learned about Bitcoin in 2011, some people might say, why don't you have, 200,000 Bitcoin? It's like, well, it wasn't necessarily a credible bet at that time. I knew what it promised for the most part, but like credibility is earned over time. And the Bitcoin protocol earned that credibility through many, many almost disasters, right? How do I know that the 21 million limit is unchangeable, right? Well, I know it now through understanding how Bitcoin is hard forked and seeing the different attacks on it and seeing Litecoin get created, which is just Bitcoin with more coins basically, and then splinter off, and then seeing that the core protocol promise of the 21 million limit is very credible and worth building on top of and worth accepting and saving it and all those things. But that wasn't necessarily true in 2011, right? It wasn't necessarily true in 2013 either, right? It built up over time, and I feel very secure in the idea that that's a credible claim, right? With Nostr, I'm not so sure yet, right? I know what some of the claims are around decentralization. I have some questions about how relays work and stuff like that, but it'll earn credibility over time. It's worth looking at. It's worth playing with, stuff like that. I'm not sure I would build anything super serious on it yet, but 3 months, 3 years, I don't know, right? But at some point, something might click, and it might be worth it to me.
I think it's spot on. It's good to be like kind of getting your nose into some of these new, really disruptive technologies, but you have to realize, just how kind of young they are. And that's something with Bitcoin in general. I think we can lose our low time preference mindset quickly, even though that's one of the foundational principles of Bitcoin and decentralization. So I want to ask you quickly, as someone who's been in the space for so long, how do you see this kind of play out over the coming decades? Obviously, there's gradually then suddenly. I mean, I've talked to Matt Hill, who's like, this is going to take, multiple generations. And Marty's obviously, everyone's optimistic, but
Sure,
it's just going to take a lot of time. So I'm always curious to get everyone's opinion on this, especially long-term Bitcoiners.
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is I don't know.
Yeah.
The longer answer is, well, it depends on your measurement of success of what Bitcoin succeeding looks like. In my lifetime, in the next 10 years, I know the value of Bitcoin is going to be off the fucking charts, right? I have no doubt in that. In terms of Bitcoin's utility as money, there are a lot of factors at play, right? What we're doing at Zaprite is one of those things, right? Of making it easier, but on both sides of the equation to accept and spend in Bitcoin. Making that, I'm pretty sure that's going to be over the next few years. That's going to pop quite a bit, right? The political ramifications, like legal tender, taxes, stuff like that. I anticipate it to be a really bumpy ride, right? There are going to be some places that get it right, and so if you're in that place, it's going to feel great, and there are going to be other places where it doesn't. But what I do feel confident in is, from the Bitcoin standard that Saifedean wrote, or from Shelling Out that Nick Szabo wrote, like, we know what happens over the medium term when hard money meets soft money, right? And that whether that is, Englishmen coming to the New World and, inflating wampum, or the Yap Islands, or sorry, the Yap Islands with the rhinestones, is that there's no escaping it, right? Is that when gold infiltrated any of these other cultures that had softer money, that they didn't know was soft money necessarily, right? Until gold came into the equation, is it devastates that economy and gold wins out. Bitcoin will do the same, right? But it'll take longer in certain areas, right? So if I can try to wrap up that thought, is that, I think over the next few years, it's going to be way easier to use Bitcoin as money. The jurisdiction rules around whether you can do that or not are going to vary based on where you're at in the world. But eventually, I don't think there's any escaping it. Maybe, and I think most of that will happen in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Mostly.
I think that's a good perspective. I always like to hear people kind of phrase that in a way that makes sense to them, because it's helpful for the audience to understand. And hopefully we get some new Bitcoiners from every show we do with the Bitcoiners.
Yeah.
Our show is probably 70% health related, but if there was one Bitcoin company that could be created, when you snap your fingers, that was working on a specific problem, maybe it's complementary to Zaprite, that could really improve Bitcoin adoption or Bitcoin as being used as money, what do you think that would be, or what would you like to see?
Well, if I could snap my fingers, it'd be Zaprite right now, but it takes hard work. The other thing I would say, I'd like Bitcoin miners to buy every single coal plant in the United States. I think that'd be very good for the United States, for Bitcoin, for decentralization, and long coal, and let's use it where it's best served in Bitcoin.
Basically just taking advantage of the energy we already have available to us locally.
Yeah, local cheap energy, right? It's good for everyone, and coal's good for everyone. And I don't see a lot of 2 gigawatt nuclear plants being built anywhere anytime soon, because that's state-owned technology. So coal's the answer. Build new coal plants, buy existing coal plants, don't let them be shut down, use them to mine Bitcoin. It's good for everyone.
Yeah, I think Wyoming's a good example of that as well.
Very much so.
Maybe I should interview some people in that industry, and it would be good to talk to.
I've visited almost every coal plant in Wyoming, so I can.
There we go.
Help you out.
Need to do another Wyoming road trip, and connect with you in the summer. So I'm just I'm really excited to see how it plays out on the state level, because I do feel like I said in the beginning, if the states kind of embrace Bitcoin and lead the way, I think they're just gonna put themselves head and toes above.
Absolutely. 10th Amendment maximalist, right? It's good to live in the United States. This is a great place, right? We have the 10th Amendment, and we have states' rights, and states have sovereignty, right? States need to learn to flex their sovereign muscles, right? Wyoming does it in a lot of ways. Texas does it in a lot of ways. A lot of places don't, but they're going to have to compete with each other. That's another great thing about the United States, is that states do compete. Texas has been kicking California's ass, right? Bringing their businesses over, bringing their high net worth individuals over, their earners over, their talent over. And that's a concerted effort, right? There's a plan in the state, in the governor's office, to win these battles, right? They are out competing California on a sovereign level, right? States are going to realize that there's a Bitcoin strategy for doing this, right? That there's industry to be built, there are jobs to be created, there's commerce to be had by having a superior Bitcoin strategy than other states. It will happen, and states do this already on other levels. So yeah, look out for that.
It's going to be fun. Well, Will, thank you so much.
Tristan, thanks
for all your work that you've done and the work you're going to be doing, because I will be utilizing this for sure. Where can people find Zaprite and download it, sign up for it, and where can people find out more about what you are working on, and I guess what you're now writing about?
Yeah, so first, Zaprite.com. Just go there, 30-day free trial. If you have something to sell, if you have business invoices to send out, try it out. 30 days for free. I'm at Will Cole on Twitter. I use it with some frequency. I'm also Will Cole on Nostr, but I can't rattle off my NPub here. That's a little bit hard. Another problem to solve. And then as of today, I've been doing some longer form writing on the tools of ignorance.xyz. So the tools of ignorance is where I'm going to be talking about software development and Bitcoin.
Is that just like your own website, or is that?
Yeah. I have a Ghost blog.
Okay.
Yeah, set up on Ghost.
What was the motivation to do that?
Several actually, but the two main ones. One, I was inspired. I've been sitting next to Parker here, watching him write his book, right? and I loved the Gradually Then Suddenly series, and I thought it was so great. And then watching him produce the book made me realize that, like, and just talking to him about it, like, he kind of inspired me to share some of the things that I'm good at. I'm not good at macro analysis and all that stuff that he's good at, but I'm good at software development. And the other is just this realization that, like, a lot of the people that I learned from in the early 2000s, Joel Spolsky and Jeff Atwood and Jeff Patton and Ryan Singer, you know, they've kind of moved on. And I thought they had really good ideas, and I combined a lot of those things to form my own ideas on how to build software, you know, and it's a unique take. I've employed it at StackOverflow and Unchained and now at Zaprite, and the people I work with seem to like the way I do it. And so I want to start sharing that with people because it's been 18 years of learning, and I'm ready to show everyone what I learned.
Well, I'm excited to dive in. I definitely will learn a thing or two because I don't have that expertise. So it's exciting. Yeah. Writing's fun. I mean, you learn a lot and you get better. The only way to get better at writing is to write. Funny enough. So good on you. I'm excited for that. Excited to connect in Wyoming maybe next time in person. That'll be a lot of fun.
Sounds good. We'll get some raw milk in Star Valley. Great spot, Shumway Farms. Best raw milk I've ever had.
Ski the Tetons on one side, and then maybe hit some hot springs as well.
Absolutely.
What more can you ask for? All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on, and thanks everyone for tuning in to another episode of Decentralized Radio. See you next time.